I, I was not sure if we'd ever be comfortable being in crowds again, and we are, and even handshaking and hugging is back, and who knows, maybe even sex will return. Anyway, I am thrilled to be here. On a personal level, some of us flourished during COVID. Some of us had serious mental health or personal or financial issues. I want to look at companies and industries and look at who were the winners, who we think are the winners as we emerge, and who are the losers. So let's get the negative out of the way to start. Let's look at some of the losers coming out of COVID. And let's start with cash. Americans never wanted to go cashless. We didn't even want to get rid of the penny, the world's most worthless piece of metal. But COVID pushed us into cashlessness. If you think about that first month or two after March of 2020, we were afraid that cash contained the virus. We were washing our mails, scrubbing down our groceries. We were forced into cashlessness. Merchants wanted contactless delivery. It turned out we liked going cashless. It made it easier. We didn't have to go to the ATM anymore. And today, cash is now our fourth preferred method of payment. It used to be second. We have really seamlessly moved to cash. We're not going to be completely cashless for another couple of years. Sweden will in 3 years. But even today in NPR, there's a story about the Treasury Department looking into digital dollars, actually paying in currency without currency. A second loser, Uber, and to a lesser degree, Lyft. Of course, we stopped going anywhere. If we had to take a car or go by car anywhere during the early days of the pandemic, the last thing we wanted to do was be in a confined space with a stranger. But Uber has bigger problems. Many of their rides have been heavily subsidized by all of the investment money they've raised. That's going away. And Uber and Lyft, of course, are also vulnerable to this great resignation, this inability to find workers, where restaurants are paying $2,000 bonuses. Childcare is at a crisis stage, and Uber is finding it very difficult to find drivers, and many of us have found it's taking longer to get an Uber to our house, and it's costing more when they come. A third loser, and this is issues that was going on before but hit a critical peak last week, Facebook. During the pandemic, we learned that Instagram, despite what they were saying to Congress, was well aware of how damaging those images were to the psyches of all of its users, but particularly teenage girls. We learned that their business model was to keep you on the site and engaged, and the easiest way to engage you was not by showing you things that delighted you, but by riling us up and getting us agitated. And then, of course, we saw last week a true implosion. We can't be sure yet if that's temporary and it will recover, or it's the beginning of something much more serious. But we saw last week their stock price lose more money in one day than any company in American history. A third of their valuation gone last week. And that was not something shared by other tech companies where Google and Amazon and Microsoft had really good weeks. A fourth loser, in-person shopping. Last June, before Delta came along, the CDC said we who were vaccinated didn't have to wear masks. We fled we escaped from our houses. We went to movie theaters. We went to shopping malls. We were thrilled to be outside, to be around other shoppers, to talk to merchants, to touch the merchandise. We loved the experience, but we weren't buying in the stores. We were going home and buying on Amazon. It was the social experience. We wanted going to the store. It was the getting out of the house, but the buying occurred back online, and online buying consolidated to the point where an Amazon Prime membership wasn't a convenience, it was a lifeline. Fifth loser, commercial real estate. No surprise here. There isn't a company in this country that has office workers who isn't asking, do we need all of that space? Do we need any of that space? I consolidated down my office. I had a bunch of extra desks, bookcases, file cabinets. I called one of those companies that comes and buys it from you, and they laughed at me. They wouldn't even, I would have had to pay them to take it away. Somewhere there are just warehouses filled with office space, and we're going to have to figure out how to convert commercial space to residential, which is very, very expensive, or to some kind of other multi-use. Finishing, or almost finishing with the losers, business travel. Our work shows a third of business travel will never recover. You travel for business for one of three reasons: to build business and relationships, to maintain business relationships, and to go to conferences and events. Well, the last two, except for the ALM, can be done pretty darn well on Zoom, although we will pick our conferences more carefully as well. We'll go to fewer, and we may go depending on where they are. I think I love CES. I don't think CES is ever going to be bigger than 30,000 people again, and it may actually benefit from that. But the part of business travel that will not be diminished is the building relationships, establishing clients. Before a company is going to give a media agency tens of millions of dollars, they want to look you in the eye, shake your hand, schmooze over dinner, and the like. Next to last, loser, mental health and anxiety. Now, with teenagers, this had been occurring long before COVID, but all of our mental health took a toll. But we found a year ago, talking to Gen Z, people under the age of 25, didn't surprise us that they felt that their mental health was poorer or worse than that of their grandparents, 65 and above. But they also reported that their physical health, that an 18 or 19-year-old was saying their physical health was worse than somebody 65 years old. That is absolutely devastating. I think the workplace and schools are going to bring in mental health practitioners who are going to help us even when we get past this initial euphoria, which may be coming. Then we're going to settle into reality, and we're all going to need somebody to talk to. Now the winners. The winner on any list, this one no exception, Amazon. In the first 6 months of the pandemic, they saw their profits go up 60%. Now, it's no big deal to see a company's profits go up 60% when they're a $5 million company. This was a $1 trillion company. We've never seen anything like it. It's now almost a $2 trillion company, and their growth is just starting. Amazon's essentially in three businesses: retail, cloud, and entertainment, although they're not really a retailer, they're a logistics company. But they're in three businesses, and they're in about 20 countries. Well, what happens when they're in 10 or 12 industries? I've always joked, but I sort of meant it, that Jeff Bezos has a list. I don't know if he keeps it in his shirt pocket or the most secure bank vault in Seattle, but a list of all the industries he plans to disrupt and in which order. And medicine or medical and financial are at the top of the list. Not to mention they're already starting to sell their own television sets, not other people's. But when Amazon's in 12, 15 industries in 100 countries, they may be a $5 trillion company. It's just started. Last week, they announced the price of Prime was going from $119 to $149. There won't be a blip of churn, simply because it was a lifeline before COVID. It was a literal lifeline during COVID. And speaking for me, one of my favorite activities during the height of the pandemic was to go online, buy stuff from Amazon, then track it during the day, get excited when it got close, hear the doorbell ring, and then when you got it, there was this huge letdown because there was nothing to look forward to. So the only thing to do was go back online and buy more. Second big winner, Disney. Bob Chapek takes over for Bob Iger as the CEO. 3 weeks later, the company is dead in the water. Nobody can go to a movie theater. Keep in mind that in 2019, the last regular year of the movie business, there were $9 billion films. 7.5 of them were Disney. The half was Spider-Man with Sony. The theatrical business was dead within a week. Theme parks were closed within a week. Even their cruise ships were grounded. The only bright spot on the horizon was the streamer they had started 3 months before, Disney Plus. That streamer, although not programmed for a pandemic, was so successful that the stock price, which was $85 in March of 2020, was at $200 a year later. And Disney, which has now reoriented the entire company around streaming, has become immensely successful. Netflix, also a big winner. It emerged from COVID, the most successful entertainment company in history. They were ready for the pandemic. They had so much content. And I think the first dollar anyone in America spends on entertainment is spent on Netflix. I think, this is an opinion, I think there were 5 cultural phenomenal television shows that defined COVID for us. 3 of them were on Netflix. The first was Tiger King, which now we're all embarrassed to remember that we watched. And by the time Tiger King 2 came around, we were over it, but we all did watch Tiger King. The second was Queen's Gambit, which I think we can be proud we watched. Third was Squid Game. I'll leave that one up to you. And the other 2, not on Netflix, were White Lotus and the show perfectly positioned for COVID, Ted Lasso. Another winner, chip manufacturers. We have seen what happens when they cannot produce enough chips. We can't get cars, we can't get refrigerators. A Tesla now uses about 3,000 chips. There's only 3 companies on Earth that can make the ultra small chips: Intel, Samsung, and TSMC. Even the Chinese, other than the Taiwanese, which is TSMC, cannot make the small chips. Chip manufacturing is becoming the most important industry on Earth. Electric vehicles, just an extension. They were already on their way before COVID. During COVID, now you wait 8 months to get a Tesla. And we now have car companies that are planning to go out of the internal combustion business. Volvo already is, and countries that are eliminating non-electric vehicles over the next few years. A fascinating winner is labor. Since I was a little boy, power has shifted from labor to management. Labor unions have declined in power. Management has grown bigger. Now that's reversing. As I mentioned with the losers in Uber, there are not enough workers to go around. Last week, with a phenomenal job report, the unemployment rate actually went up 0.1% because 5 million people gave up their jobs, were not laid off. Something powerful is going on. My work at the center shows that 80% of American workers are satisfied with their jobs, 72% are satisfied with their company culture and responsibilities, 59% are satisfied with their wages and benefits, and no one's ever satisfied. And yet half of them are looking for other jobs, and half of those in other industries. What's happening is we're looking at our life, whether we're young and say, what do I want to do with the rest of it? If we're older and say, what do I want to do with the rest of it? And a lot of us are saying, it's not what I'm doing now. Another big winner, leisure travel. While a third of business travel is gone forever, many of us will work from home at least more than we did before COVID. We're going to get sick of the same four walls. The desire to get out, to travel, to see more of the world. One of my favorite countries that I go to several times a year that I haven't been allowed in for 2 years, Australia, this morning announced they will be open in 2 weeks. We are going to go everywhere. And incidentally, the rest of the world is going to go everywhere. And we're going to see leisure fares climb, airplanes be more crowded. Maybe we'll be able to see cheaper business class seats because a third of business travel is gone forever. Two last winners. We heard a little bit about this in the last session. Telemedicine. Our work shows 75% of us have used telemedicine or will consider using it. Of those who have used it, satisfaction rate is 89%. We love not commuting. My doctor at UCLA Hospital, it's $14 to park just to get into the office, let alone all the other costs. And also traffic. We don't have to commute. We don't have to sit for an hour in the waiting room waiting for the doctor. We can sit on our couch waiting for the doctor. And we're not sitting in a waiting room with lots of sick people. And I don't just mean COVID, I mean colds and flus and God knows what else. Of the 11% who don't like telemedicine, it's nothing that they've actually had a bad experience. It's just an ephemeral, I don't feel like I've really been seen. So what we're going to see more of is before your doctor's appointment, you're going to go to Rite Aid, Duane Reade, the pharmacy. You'll get your blood test. You'll get whatever you need to test. Those results will be sent to the doctor, and you will only see your doctor by your choice and theirs when you need to be seen, which means you'll go to a doctor's office that's less crowded and you'll get more of his or her time. And the last winner, not that there aren't a few others here and there, but probably a nice way to end, one of the real big winners coming out of COVID, cannabis. Our work shows alcohol consumption was up 30%, cannabis consumption was up 61%. Now this coincides with cannabis being increasingly legalized. We know stores like Walmart are talking about selling cannabis. What else has to be said about social acceptability? AARP has endorsed CBD, and we are learning more about its ability to deal with depression. But cannabis, the federal prohibition is probably a year or two from being lifted so that we can go through TSA. But cannabis has really been a very big winner. So with that, it is, everyone's saying this, but it can't be said enough. It is wonderful to see you and be back to our old lives. And we know that everything's not gone, but we have a really great feeling that we're headed in that direction. I hope to see more of you. I hope to see more of people. Thank you very much.